Thank you everybody for joining this meeting. I wish the occasion was more joyful than commemorating a year now since Julian Assange was in the despicable manner dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy into the Belmarsh Prison. Shortly after that happened, of course, we saw the indictments that we had been expecting for 10 years. They materialized in a shocking manner. 18 counts, 17 of whom were on the basis of the Espionage Act. And in the entirety, this amounted to 175 years in prison. Now, of course, this is one of the gravest attacks on journalism in my time and probably in my lifetime. I have never seen anything like it, and hopefully I will never see anything like it. It has to be resisted on all fronts, not just because of Julian Assange, because of journalism, which I really feel strongly about in this world, as to keep our world sane and our democracy alive. Now, in this year, of course, we have seen a process which is quite extraordinary in the UK, in a country that we believe is civil, which is probably among most people is viewed as having a robust and fair justice system. After all the experience in the last 12 months, I beg to differ, and it is obvious to everybody who has followed the events that this is certainly not the case in the case of Julian Assange. The case of Julian Assange is a test case. It's a test case in so many ways. Now, journalism is on trial. Of course, all this was pertaining to the releases of 2010 and 2011, releases who were exposing war crimes and wrongdoing and exposing corruption in the US in relation to the rest of the world. There is no doubt in my mind that now is the time for revenge. It is not a question of getting any justice. It is raw power being used in a deadly manner. It is like a drone attack by legal means. It is the same element that was used in the assassination of Soleimani in Iraq. It is the same element that we are now seeing more and more when it comes to the United States and its foreign policy. It has lost its legitimacy. It is now simply attacking with brute force on all fronts. And it's scary, and it should be scary to everybody, and it should be recognized by everybody. Now, who can we rely on? Because Julian Assange is a political prisoner, for certain. There is no doubt about it in anybody's mind who actually just looks at the elements of the case. But who can we rely on for support? What about the left? What is left of the left? If we look across the ocean to the United States, we see that Joe Biden is probably going to be the one that the Democratic Party is going to put forth the next fall to try to topple Donald Trump. Joe Biden is the person who in 2010 called Julian Assange a high-tech terrorist, among many others. I don't think there is any way that you could look at any positive from that individual and that office and that party in the event that there is a change in the White House after the election next fall. On the UK front, we have a new leadership in the opposition. Keir Starmer is now taking leadership in the Labour Party. He was, of course, the head of the Crown Prosecution Service at the time when that office was actively engaging in a conspiracy, I would say, to try to stall the forward moving of the Swedish case. We have evidence, which of course Stefania will discuss in details after me, that the office under Keir Starmer was basically working its best to stall the case and working against Julian Assange in every way. What can you expect from Keir Starmer? He was asked whether he opposed the extradition of Julian Assange, and he replied somewhat in the manner verbatim that he had faith in the UK justice system and it had to have its course. I do not share that faith. And on the very grounds of having seen so many things in the courtrooms in the UK in the last 12 months, especially, that I am stunned. We've seen a judge call Julian Assange a narcissist, a judge who has never seen or met Julian before, only actually heard him say his name and date of birth. That's it. We heard another judge say similar things and then sentence Julian to probably the harshest sentence for breaching bail in UK history, an unheard of sentence. Another judge dismissed everything that was presented as mitigating elements, for example, when referring to the United Nations distinguished working group on arbitrary detention that found that Julian had been arbitrarily detained. The judge simply said that the UN rulings by this Geneva-based body had no bearing in his courtroom. Similar dismissal has been pointed towards what Niels Meltzer has said about Julian in his case, the foremost authority on torture in the UN body. So the United Nations do not have any bearings in the UK courts, neither actually do the rulings from the European Court of Human Rights when it was presented that keeping Julian Assange in a glass cage had been actually addressed, a similar case in Strasbourg, where it was found that it was against human rights principle and the charter to have the situation in that manner. Totally dismissed, without a second look, or probably without a first look as well. So, faith in the justice system, not really, not in my heart. And what we've seen, of course, from the magistrate court, Vanessa Barretzer, has been absolutely shocking and shameful. She has, from the outset, made it absolutely clear that she will try to find anything in order just to support the rubber stamping of the extradition for Julian Assange. There is no hope left to try to persuade that woman. She has frequently dismissed strong arguments. She has, on more than 2 occasions, probably 3 occasions, brought pre-written rulings into court before she heard the arguments. On 2 occasions, you might have a little sympathy because she got sent earlier the day or the day before some written submissions. But on the 3rd ruling, she had seen nothing. It still came with a pre-written ruling into the courtroom. So it's a show trial. Julian Assange is a political prisoner who is facing and enduring a show trial in a UK court. That is shocking, and it should be shocking. Barretzer has denied Julian not just to sit with his lawyers, she has denied him bail, even when facing the serious dangers that we are now facing, everybody in our society, and especially the prisoners, for the simple reason that, as every epidemiologist will tell you, prisons are like petri dish for viruses and pandemics. We are seeing examples of cruise ships where 80-90% of passengers are within days infected. The same applies to actually aircraft carriers. We saw one of the biggest aircraft carriers in the United States having to dock because it spread like fire, the COVID inside the ship. And of course, the same applies to the prison, and we are not getting truthful and accurate information of what's going on in there. We know about 2 deaths. Those, only one has been acknowledged, but we know of 2. And the case is, of course, much more than the one that has been reported, for the simple reason that nobody is tested unless he falls gravely ill. If you show any symptoms, you are thrown into a separate community within the prison, which means that nobody dares to cough inside the prison, because if you get a common cold or a regular flu, you will end up being put in with prisoners who have tested positive and will most surely get it, which is outrageous. Now, going back to the court case, of course, it was outlined in the first part of the hearing in February, all the arguments that are for the dismissal of the extradition request. They are so many and so strong that individually, all the arguments should suffice, individually and separately, to dismiss that extradition, let alone bundling them all together. The health reason, the fact that espionage is not an extraditional offense according to the bilateral treaty between the two countries on extradition. But let me dwell on one thing. It is the spying on the legally privileged conversation that Julian had in the Ecuadorian embassy. If we go back a little bit, just to put the context right in that case, in 2017, Wikileaks released an information about the online arsenal that the CIA had at its disposal to make online attacks. It was not a highly recognized release. It didn't get much traction, but it was surely noticed inside the CIA. And it was an extremely embarrassing period for the CIA at the time. The director at the time was Mike Pompeo, of course, and he went in an unprecedented manner in his first speech as a CIA director. He went into the podium and outlined who the main enemies of the USA were. They were Al-Qaeda on one hand and WikiLeaks on the other. And he called WikiLeaks a non-state hostile intelligence service. At that point, we knew what was coming. What does it mean when you brand a media organization like that? It means that every medicine is now okay. You can apply whatever means you have at your disposal to basically take down that organization. It didn't result in an outcry, which was, of course, one of the shameful things about the media, that how silent they were about criticizing all this. And the media has been complicit in many things. Only came to life a little bit last year when they saw the indictments and the severity of it. And it's not because they were so passionate about saving Julian Assange. They were simply seeing how close to home this all was. We're talking about the media partners that we worked with. Now, we now know through Spain, and this case in Spain, that extensive spying was done by the CIA in the Ecuadorian embassy. This was all financed by a person, Adelson, who is the biggest financial backer of Donald Trump, and reportedly Mike Pompeo in his bid for a Senate seat next fall. We have a very grave situation at our hands. A year ago, we had to start out campaigning to save Julian Assange's life. A lot of people thought we were overly dramatic at the time. Of course, we were not, but nobody is doubting that today. And there are so many things that are combined in the Julian Assange case that this is so much more than the case of an individual who has a partner, children, a grand family. It is so much more that is sort of entwined in this case, which should let us all come together in fighting for his freedom. And now it is not just a question of trying to do that in the next few months. Every day counts now, and Julian Assange must be set free immediately. Thank you.